Okay, so yeah, I thought maybe we do a short contemplation about what we discussed this morning. So that means we have to contemplate or check if that's really true. Is it really true that the cause of suffering are these afflictions, and the root cause of this is this ignorance of a concrete I am mine, right? So there's a few things. It's very important to get conviction, right? We have different levels of understanding. You know, we say, okay, yeah, makes sense. But that makes sense is still by the power of listening and thinking a little bit. To make it more, a more profound understanding, we have to contemplate these points. Yeah, we know we have the wisdom from hearing, the wisdom from contemplation, and the wisdom from meditation. Right? So the most stable form of wisdom is that comes from meditation. Meaning, you analyze what you've heard, you come to a conclusion, and you focus on that conclusion. Right? That's the stable imprints we need for future lifetimes. Just having heard teachings and said, okay, yeah, makes sense. It's good, but it's not a very stable one. That's why it's important to contemplate and meditate. You know, we don't have that much time to do it in the weekends, but we give you the method how to do it, and you should try to do it on a daily basis, right? Because the real strong imprints that comes from contemplating these points, it's much more profound. It's much stabler understanding than just, okay, yeah, it looks like this, yeah, it makes sense. But if you really examine it and you come to a conclusion and you see, oh, it's really true. That's the only way realizations will come into existence, you know. So we need to contemplate these points. Yeah. So we have a particular structure, as we know. So first we do the counting of the breath in order to generate kind of a little bit of concentration, and then we do the visualization with Sakyamuni Buddha, and then we do the actual analytical meditation. Because analytical meditation is giving us the insights, and that produces conclusions, and then we focus on that conclusion, and then hold that conclusion for some time. And that's the wisdom that comes from meditation, right? That's stable. Yeah, so we need to do that in order to really generate the realizations for, you know, in our life, in this life, and stable imprints for the future. Very important. Yeah. So yeah, let's give it. So what we have to contemplate is see suffering, physically or verbal. You know, you harm another person, and the mind is disturbed by these afflictions. Just to see the nature of the destructive nature of the afflictions, and that when an habituation is being put, imprint ripens, then there's a possibility for future kind of propelling of similar activities or similar experience, right? Yeah. So try to contemplate a few of those points. Yeah. So yeah, first we take the counting of the breath as the object of concentration. Yeah. So count every in-breath as 1, out-breath as 2, and then keep counting until 10 and start over with counting. So do that for about a minute or two. So then when the mind is settled down a bit, then imagine Sakyamuni Buddha in front, and surrounding yourself are all the sentient beings. And focus upon the suffering of sentient beings. Think without understanding samsara and nirvana, without understanding the Four Noble Truths, I will not be able to generate initiation. I will not be able to achieve, you know, these paths of liberation and enlightenment. So for that purpose, I request Buddha Sakyamuni, and he, you know, is very pleased. From his heart comes white light, purifies all negative karma of all sentient beings surrounding yourself, including yourself, and then also moves all obstacles, in particular the obstacle of understanding the Four Noble Truths, for example. That gets completely washed away. So do this visualization of the white light for about, let's say 1 or 2 minutes. So I think you completely filter this white light and completely purified. Obstacles have been pacified, and then with the same intention, request the Buddha in front, and this time yellow golden nectar light comes from his heart, crown of your head, and crown of all sentient beings. And by getting filled with this nectar light, I think you get all the realizations of the path, the potentials for the realizations to come about. In particular, the understanding of fundamental truths. So try to visualize in this way and be convinced it actually happens. So do that for about a minute or two. And I think you completely filter this yellow golden nectar light, and the mind is completely suitable to meditate, just for the realizations to come about. And then try to analyze this, aspect of our minds that when strong destructive emotions come up, how do they arise? What is the real root cause of this? And try to analyze when strong desire comes or strong aversion comes. It's always rooted in this I, or it first comes with its self-centeredness, so to say. That self-centeredness that's based on seeing the concrete I am mine. That comes up during these kind of events of destructive emotions or these afflictions like anger and attachment, as we just discussed. I recognize that and see, based on that concrete appearance of I am mine, then the mind gets really disturbed. And we make a distinction between my and them, my friends and their people, or my object, my things. I don't like this person. And then we lose the clarity of the mind. It disturbs the peace of the mind, right? That's what it does. There's one thing to contemplate, the sequence of grasping an I that causes this disturbance of mind, and see you lose peace of mind, the clarity of the mind goes, and that actually motivates us to react, either verbally or physically, to another person. And then sometimes we say something wrong, or see how that karma, what we say, is actually karma, right? Was being created at that time based on this concrete concept of I am mine. Affliction arises, and then we act, and that has kind of a negative result, right? So then we walk away from that situation, and we start to worrying about thinking, oh, I shouldn't have said it, I shouldn't have said that. So it disturbs the mind even more. So see, it's actually cause for suffering. So this sequence of ignorance, afflictions, and action. And then again, after that action stops, there's again a result of disturbance or mental suffering. And so try to analyze that process for about, let's say, a minute or 2, 3. Yeah, analyze for yourself. and try to have a conclusion. Yeah, let's see. Try to conclude there is, yeah, it's really true. First, there's a concrete I and mind that appears, and based on that, there's kind of me and them, and then kind of aversion can arise. Can arise based on that understanding, and that disturbs your mind, and you might say the wrong thing or do act incorrectly. It's kind of an action happens, and then later on you regret that particular event. So it's kind of how this I creates the problem, and how these afflictions creates the suffering. So try to come to that insight and focus on that conclusion for about a minute. And it's really rooted in this concrete concept or appearance of I and mind. Focus on that conclusion for about a minute. And then contemplate and see if you take away this appearance of this I and mind. If you take that away, it doesn't come up anymore, then those afflictions also will not arise, because they lose their concrete building blocks. And so try to analyze that also for about, let's say, a minute or two. And then also here, try to come to a conclusion. It actually sees I have to eliminate this ignorance, because if that's been taken care of, then those afflictions won't arise, and there's no result of suffering anymore. So try to come to that insight, that ignorance has to be taken away with correct understanding of reality, that there is no concrete I. It doesn't exist the way it appears. It has to be taken away. And come to that conclusion, and then focus on that conclusion for about a minute. And then maybe kind of a prayer or commitment. I think I have to understand that ignorance much better, and have to strive to understand emptiness for the purpose, to eliminate this ignorance, the real cause for all suffering, to take that away. So make a strong kind of commitment or a prayer or wish for yourself. And then to conclude, then Sakyamuni Buddha, if you are pleased with your intention, comes to ground your head, and the throne dissolves into the lotus, becomes smaller and smaller, and then descends to the level of your heart, and then dissolves, or you can think it becomes one with your own mind at the level. All right, stop. So that's, the more convinced you be of this kind of process of ignorance causing the afflictions to arise, that's quite important, right? To understand that aspect, that only will generate a real kind of genuine form of renunciation, as we just discussed. So that's very essential. And then, because it creates, as we saw, ignorance creates kind of afflictions, right? And those afflictions creates karma, action. The karma stops and comes to ripening in the future, right? So if you don't do anything in that way, then it will propel the same sequence over and over and over and over again. Since the beginning of this lifetime, we have been in this kind of cycle, right, without end. So now it's time to do something about it. And we can do something about it. Yeah, we have human intelligence, we can contemplate these things. And that's, it's just a matter of fact of time to progress in this constructive way of thinking over years. Produces a more stable of understanding. Not only study, but also contemplate, like we just did, on a daily basis. And then throughout the day, try to reflect upon things, look around and see habituation patterns of being stuck in a particular way of life all the time, without thinking another possibility is possible. There's many things we can, on a daily basis, see, and we look at the news and we see, violence or problems created by these destructive emotions, right? And that's rooted in this concrete I and mind. You can see, even with world leaders, some world leaders, they're much more capable of thinking about humans. Some world leaders, they only think about their own kind of good appearance or having a particular position. It's very interesting to check and see it's all rooted in these mental states. So that's very important. We can do something about it. So that's take it throughout the day, because we only have time a little bit in the morning, generally speaking, to contemplate. But our minds, we can have the freedom to think about things we see, hear, etc. in daily life. So then the whole day becomes kind of a little bit of a practice. With a good intention, you start your day. And every opportunity you have to contemplate drawbacks of samsara, especially in relation with this particular model, you should take into account. A lot of things you can think about all the time. Whenever you walk, you see a leaf falling from a tree, you can contemplate the permanence, right? Or you see a person shouting at another person, you see the destructive nature of anger. You see the news and you see something else. You can just contemplate instead of getting, you watch the movie or the news, instead of just getting, your mind gets into the screen, just from a neutral perspective. Look what's going on. And you can learn so much. So that's the real way to and then if you habituate your mind to that pattern, then time doesn't get to waste. Right? You see that? It becomes a very constructive way of thinking. Yeah. So then what kind of sufferings do we have? We talked about 3 types of suffering. The suffering of change. And we talked about this all pervasive, compounded form of suffering, right? But there's also that also we can contemplate. So for tomorrow or the next day, try to see what is the suffering of suffering? What is the suffering of change? Is it really true that this contaminated happiness is not very stable? Is that really true or not? It's true, we would desire or we like to have something and we think we get benefit out of it, but actually sometimes it's completely destructive. Like flies who will go to light. In the dark, they always fly to the light. And there's real fire or something, or a hot lamp, they go and then they burn themselves. You see? That's kind of a strong desire mixed with ignorance and understanding. So that's what our life is all about. We want to have something and we think we get something out of it, but actually it's more destructive than we actually thought before. So that's contemplations in regards with the 3 types of suffering. There's also other contemplations of other types of suffering. It's contemplations about 6 or 7 or 8. There's different ways of contemplating suffering. So that's one. It's standard suffering of 7, sometimes being indicated the suffering of humans, and sometimes dependent on the suffering of samsara. Depends which text you follow. Right? So that means there's 4 sufferings of physical aspects of suffering, and 3 mental sufferings, and a conclusion. So what are those 7 types of suffering? Right. So the 4 is this, the suffering of birth, sickness, aging, and death. It's kind of we can experience as humans. So birth, the first one, you come out of the womb. Before you come out of the womb, you're stuck inside. And then when the baby comes out, everybody says, "Oh, so nice, so cute. Look at this little cute one." But actually, this little cute one is not that cute. You really analyze well. It's true, right? It comes out crying and shouting, and it's just our attachment prevents us from seeing that as a problem. Yeah. So it's true. Children, yeah. I took care of it, 5.5-year-olds for many years, and then people see him and say, "Oh, such a nice, cute little boy." But if you know him well, he's not that nice, little cute all the time. It's true. It's kind of, I never practiced so much patience than in those years, taking care of his orphan. I learned a lot. So I can tell you how to raise children, for example. To take them when they completely blow up. You have to distract them. So I just used to take them because I cannot talk about the situation because it makes only worse. The mind is stuck. You have to take the mind out of the loop. Then mostly I took him something he never saw before, some complete distraction. And then talk about, "Oh, look at this, and then he gets out of the loop, and then it stops. It's very interesting. Anyway, it's not part of that. But that means if a baby born comes out, it's not all that nice and beautiful, right? And to be squeezed as a newborn is also not that nice. That's why they cry when they come out. It's not they come out and happy say, "Hello, everybody, I'm so happy to be here." Because that's not the way they come out, right? It's different. The suffering is different. You see, if you really contemplate, same people contemplate, they look at the Animal Planet or these kind of channels. They say, "Oh, look, a tiger is getting a deer. Look at that." But it's suffering, right? There's a kind of, or a zebra or something is just being attacked and eaten alive. It's not something that's, we say, "Oh yeah, that's nature," but if you imagine the suffering the zebra is going through, it's quite intense, So same thing when the baby comes out, is not all that kind of nice, And then you in this dark place before with all the liquids, and then you come out, and then all the lights, all the eyes of all those people you never saw before. It's frightening, probably, And then you put on a piece of the most soft towel they can find in a hospital, but still it feels like sandpaper if you always been surrounded by liquid. So it's not all that nice. We forget, so we think we don't think about it. But at that time, there are suffering. It's kind of suffering. So it's the suffering when we come out. And then, then old age. So first, you get sick, of course. And you get sick as a teenager or all kind of other mental things. I remember when I was a teenager. You don't really know what you want to do in the future. It's a very confusing time. The time when you're 10 until like 16, 17 is a very confusing period. What do you want to do with your life? You don't understand many things because you don't really can comprehend those issues in life. It's a very confusing time. And that's why many youngsters are depressed or have difficulties. So then you grow up and then you don't know what you want to do and losing friends and all kind of hassle growing up. And before that, of course, first you have to learn how to walk, how to talk. Then you're hungry, but you can express that. Or you're thirsty, you can express that. And then you try to walk and then, oops, there you go, bam, your head against the table edge. And it's kind of constant problems, right? It's kind of, if you look in that way, it's not all that nice. As a human, of course, we quite well off, but still, it's not perfect. And that's what we contemplate. So you grow up. So the first one is the suffering of birth. Then all the hassle of growing up, and then the suffering of sickness. You get sick, and it just happens to you beyond your control. You don't like to get sick. You see, that's really what we say. Means it happens by you, by something else beyond your control, right? Nobody wants to get sick, but it happens. You know, like this lady who was during the lockdown said, so much suffering with COVID. She said, I suffered so much, but I was stuck in this body. You see? It's exactly beyond control. You just have to experience this. You see, that's what it is. Or the power back on affliction. Yeah, so that's the suffering of sickness. It was quite easy to understand. But when we're not sick, we don't really understand. Then when we're sick, then we're too occupied by thinking about the sickness and to be free of it. So then also we don't really understand it. So that's why we have to contemplate. When we, at the moment, not really sick, we have to contemplate these things. That's the right time to try to understand what's going on. So that's the sickness. Then, old age. Yeah, I think, yeah, a few of you know what I'm talking about. A few of you are still too young. But yeah, if you're over 50, then things start to change. Exercise becomes more complicated. You know? And then, yeah, the older you get, is not things going to get better and better. Things going to worse and worse and worse. Wait, Linda. You wait. It's kind of, for the time being, it's quite comfy, you know? But after some time, you will see then the body starts to ache, and sit in a particular way, or knees cause problems, or digestion causes problems, or memory causes problems. It's very confusing. Some people in the 60s, 70s, then, they start forgetting things. It's very, and they know they forget things. It's very kind of uncomfortable. So that's kind of many sufferings of old age, and it's getting worse and worse and worse until you die. Right? It's kind of course, if you deal with it well mentally, then you can grow mentally. But physically, there's a kind of problem, and you cannot prevent it from happening. It just happens to you. So that's also beyond our control, and that's what Shantideva said. If you have a problem like that, like old age, and you cannot do anything about it, then you shouldn't worry about it and just move on. But that's our mental attitude that brings strength, But physically, of course, there is a kind of suffering that we should recognize. Yeah, so old age, and then you die, and that's it. And then next life you're born again and start over. Same kind of, pattern. That's life. So you can check if it's really something you like to do for many lifetimes or not. So to contemplate that, what the Buddha said, you should know suffering. So you should contemplate these sufferings in order to generate a wish to be free of that. If you don't generate that wish, then you just keep going. And yeah, as long as we're born in this kind of circumstances, it's not all too bad. But you can also be born in more difficult periods. Famine where there's no food, or war zones, or epidemics where are a little bit more severe than what we're facing now. If you're born in those kind of periods, then it's slightly different, right? And it's just a matter of fact of causing conditions to come together. Because with the COVID, same thing. In the beginning, many people were shocked because they didn't believe something like this could happen. I had the same thing. I came out of Eastern Tibet. I didn't watch the news for a few weeks. Came to Kathmandu. I was like, what? No, I have to go back to India. No, you cannot go back to India because the border is closed. If you want to go to London, you better go tomorrow because otherwise you're stuck. Yeah, it's kind of, so my mind was kind of in 24 hours kind of, what? So we don't like to believe because we grasp this permanence, you see. But then I was thinking, contemplating later, it's so beneficial that something like this happens. Of course, there's a lot of suffering, but you cannot do anything about it. But if you contemplate it in a way, then something beyond our control, you see, then it's quite helpful, because if it's, I'm stuck here and I have this problem, that problem, I don't want this, that's not real renunciation, right? The real renunciation comes from understanding why is this happening, and then you generate a real kind of understanding of the cause behind all this, and then you want to get rid of that cause, and then you come to a more constructive way of renunciation, right? Yeah. So that's the four sufferings of the body: birth, sickness, aging, and death. Then when you die, it's for some people very frightening. In the trained mind, it's no issue, and then you lose people, it's kind of things like that happen, right? And you cannot prevent it. Also beyond our control. Why? People say, why? But that's why, is because that's the nature of samsaric life. And as soon as we're born, we know we're going to die. We're going to lose people, friends or family members. It's going to happen. So the more you understand that aspect, then there's less kind of mental suffering and more acceptance, And then you can just see samsara as a joke at a particular time. Not kind of but a joke in the sense of don't worry about it, but in a constructive way, create causes to get out of it. That's very important. So it's very beneficial for the mind always to keep things relaxed and not to worry about things, because that's not really constructive. Understand the suffering, do something about it, and have the conviction. If you walk in that way, then over time you will produce kind of a very constructive way of thinking that move you out of this cycle. So that's what we're talking about. Yeah. So there's a suffering of birth, sickness, aging, death. And then also there's the mental aspects. There's 3, right? Among the 7-fold suffering. So we're meeting situations we don't like to meet. Right? You want to have a particular job you cannot find, so you have to do something else. Or you're stuck somewhere and you have to deal with a political situation you don't like to be in, but yeah, that's what it is. That's also an aspect of samsara. Meeting situations you don't like to meet. And then never meeting situations you like to meet. You want to go somewhere, but you cannot go. Or you want to do something, but you cannot do it. Right? There's also aspects of samsara. Because we don't have control over samsara. And that's why these things happen. Right? And then there's other kind of suffering of never really finding what you're looking for. Or there's kind of no satisfaction. Never finding what you're looking for. It's kind of, you want to do this, that, but you never really have kind of, oh, now I've got it. Now I don't need anything else anymore. That doesn't really happen. So there's no satisfaction in whatever you do in samsara. Even if the best conditions, the best circumstances, still you want to have something else. Or the green is always, not the green, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. That's what it is, right? We always think, oh, that's better. If I become like that, that's better. If I be that person, that's better. That's the same thing. Yeah. So that's kind of no satisfaction. So that's 7 types of suffering: birth, sickness, aging, death. 4 kind of physical ones, with associated mental sufferings, of course. Yeah. And then 3 aspects of situations of meeting the things you like to meet, and always meeting things you don't like to meet, but never really finding what you're looking for. So there's 3 aspects of physical situations as well, mainly mental kind of suffering as well. So that's kind of 7 types of suffering we talk about in the text. And then Lama Tsongkhapa in the Great Exposition, he says, in short, it's very nice summary. In short, Lama Tsongkhapa says, heaven contaminated elements. And that summarizes those 7, right? Because those 7 mainly talk about the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change. Right? They're quite easy to recognize. Well, Lama Tsongkhapa, that's so powerful when Lama Tsongkhapa says, in short, Dona, Sachi, Dunga means to have the contaminated arrogance. This kind of illustration of this all pervasive compounding from suffering. So as long as you have contaminated arrogance that is produced by the power of karma and afflictions, then you have always underneath the surface the possibility to suffer. So that's the real, when the Buddha said you should understand suffering, that's what the Buddha was referring to, this all pervasive compounding form of suffering. As long as you have karma and afflictions, you're propelled. So that's what Lama Tsongkhapa said. In short, having the result of this all pervasive compounding form of suffering, or this illustration, the contaminated arrogance, meaning contaminated body and mind. How contaminated and what means contamination? contaminated with afflictions, right? It says sakche, sakche. Sak means, sakche means possessing contamination, possessing or having afflictions. That's what it says. So as long as you have afflictions, then you're never free, and you never have real happiness. You see that? That's why this summary is so profound. So that's when the Buddha said you should know suffering, but refer to this point. That's very clear. Lama Tsongkhapa is saying that's what has to be understood. As long as you come in afflictions, then that's it. You have to suffer, right? So that's the real thing to take care of, the real thing to eliminate. And then we start to generate interest in what are these destructive emotions, right? And how do I get out of these destructive emotions? How can I eliminate them? What are the antidotes? Right? So that brings us to the next point. And we talked about, before the break, we talked about the three poisons. I didn't say the three poisons, but we labeled them as attachment, anger, and ignorance, right? The three poisons. So, poison is, if you have three persons, you with a few persons together. One person, all three of you took some poison here, no? So, and then all three, and then one person already died from the poison. The other person is in the process of dying. And you were taking the same. What comes to mind? Vomit it out or do something, right? So in the same way, we have the poison of afflictions. And we see people suffering around us all the time. And for us, it's just a matter of fact of time for that to happen. So it's kind of a similar attitude, right? Very similar. It's a very nice analogy in the text of those three people. One is already dead, and one is in the process of dying, and you just sitting there on the side, having taken the same poison. Having these afflictions. Right? So that's why we call it the three poisons: attachment, anger, and ignorance. Yeah? So it's time to do something before it's too late. So that's what we talk about. So then another aspect of afflictions is 6 types of afflictions. 6 root afflictions. There's many more. There's also secondary afflictions, but the 6 root afflictions is also very important to know. So what are the 6 root afflictions, or sometimes translated as 6 root delusions in more older translation? Yeah. So the 6 afflictions, again, it talks about attachment. We already discussed, being number 1, right? Number 2 being anger. So you see that the 3 poisons comes back because they one has root afflictions. So root afflictions means all other afflictions arise from these 6. That's why they call root afflictions. And also you can say the 3 poisons, everything arises from the 3 poisons, right? Attachment, anger, and ignorance. So in the 6 root afflictions, we have attachment, anger, number 2, then pride, number 3. And pride also is kind of, an affliction. Why? Because if you think you're quite something, or you know things quite well, or you think you don't have faults, only qualities, that's an incredible obstacle, right? You never progress. So that's why pride is actually a very strong, affliction. And in Nagarjuna's letter for a friend, it says actually very interesting. If you have difficulties in life, it helps you not to get pride. This kind of conceit. It's very true. If everything goes well, then it's very easy to generate pride. But if you're facing some difficulties, then you see some drawbacks. So then pride doesn't come out. So that's a good thing. Anyway, so then Nagarjuna says, if you're facing obstacles, it's good because pride can arise. He said it to the king because he wrote this letter for a friend. So pride is kind of a puffed up state of mind. Take things you're more superior than others. And even if others are not, if others are not kind of, lower in their development, you think you're more, right? And others who are higher developed, you think you're equal, or better even. It's a kind of puffed up state of mind that thinks you're superior. And that's a very obstacle, big obstacle, because it prevents you from changing, right? If you don't recognize your own faults or your own drawbacks, you will never change. You can see people always like that. They don't acknowledge their own faults. You know, they just say you just drink a disinfectant and then and that kills the virus. And then everybody's criticizing you and they say, "Oh, did I say that?" "Oh, it was just a joke." You say, "Yeah." It's kind of, you know, that's pride. You see, it prevents people from seeing their own drawbacks. So it's a big issue, even with politicians. Yeah, pride is a very big problem. And even in the science of leadership, it's true. It's been discussed. If you have a lot of pride, then it prevents you from understanding problems in your department or whatsoever. You know, you think, oh, everything's fine, and I'm the boss, and I'm doing well. That prevents you from seeing and addressing problems, right? So it's even on every level of society, it causes a problem. And then number 4 is ignorance. That's the ignorance of merely not knowing. That's very important. Number 4, this ignorance is not the ignorance of the view of transitory collection. It's not a view as such. It's just, for example, you know, law of cause and effect doesn't exist. That kind of ignorance. Or the Buddha doesn't exist. You know, and the Dharma doesn't exist. That's a kind of ignorance. It's negative, because if you think there's no law of cause and effect, you know, that prevents you from developing, right? And that prevents you from understanding karma. So if you think, oh, it doesn't matter whatever you do, then you create a lot of negative karma because of that. So that's why it's kind of an ignorance. Yeah, so that's this ignorance number 4. It's not the ignorance of the root of samsara, but the ignorance of not believing in law of cause and effect, or not believing in past future lifetimes. It also creates a kind of obstacle in our spiritual progress. That's that kind of ignorance. Then number 5 is doubt, but not just any doubt. We call afflictive doubt. Means a doubt that is afflictive, means it has kind of affliction. You know, there's 3 types of doubt. Remember or not? I explained what I mean. Some people like it, but not to everybody, maybe. Yeah. So there's 3 types of doubt. There's doubt, a very technical term, tending towards the factual, or doubt that goes to the side of the reality, right? There's one doubt. That's not a doubt we're referring to. There's also a doubt that is not tending towards the factual, or we say doubt tending towards a non-factual, meaning that doesn't go in accordance with reality. And there's neutral doubt. There's 3 types of doubt. So you can cut it short by doubt that goes to the right direction of understanding reality. And there's doubt that does not go to the right direction, but goes to the wrong direction. And there's a neutral doubt. I'll give you an example. For example, the famous example, the cosmetic industry. Here, they give you a shampoo, or they give you a pill, or a combination, a shampoo, a pill, and a cream. And they say, if you use this, then your hair will remain dark, will not get gray, and you don't get any wrinkles anymore. That's, of course, if you analyze, that's not possible, but some people believe to a certain extent that's true, right? There's a wrong view of believing in permanence of your face. You look in the mirror, you say, oh yeah, it's really looking good, it's green. And then you think your face is the same, right? Then you go to Jamyang Buddhist Center in London, and over Zoom there's this monk sitting on the other side of the screen, and that monk tells you, look, you're momentarily changing. You're gonna die one day. You say, what? And then you start questioning. The cosmetic industry would taught you to believe yourself that you won't get gray if you use the shampoo. You see? So first you had the wrong view, and now this monk tells you you're impermanent. So then you start thinking, and you do this contemplation. Oh, maybe I'm permanent, maybe impermanent. That's doubt. Doubt is a two-pointed mind, right? Yeah. So when you have the first doubt, because you're still influenced by the cosmetic industry, so you think, yeah, TENZIN NAMDAK, he's just talking about this, but probably I'm permanent. Probably it's not true. You see that doubt? It's not going the right direction. So you still believe in cosmetic industry, and think you're permanent. You think, oh, maybe I'm permanent. So first there's a wrong view. That's very important. First the wrong view, I'm permanent. No question. Single pointed, wrong view. Right. Then you come to this Jamyang Buddhist center, and then this monk tells you, you momentary change. Then you start thinking, oh, is that true or not? You start questioning yourself, right? So in that regard, doubt is very important because it brings questions. Yeah, so you start questioning. Okay, there's a number that tells me I'm impermanent, but it looks like I'm the same as yesterday. So now you start questioning it, right? You don't believe single-pointedly that you're permanent, you start questioning. It's a very good thing. But then you think, oh, maybe I'm permanent, maybe impermanent. Probably I'm permanent. Probably NAMDAK is talking nonsense. Probably it's just, I'm just permanent. Don't listen to him anymore. You see that doubt is not going the right direction. You see that? It is doubt not tending towards the factual. It's still going to misunderstand the reality. Because we are impermanent, we are not permanent, right? We momentary changing. So then you're thinking, okay, let's attend another Zoom class. So then again, it tells you, look at a picture when you were 16. Look in the mirror. What's the difference? The difference doesn't come overnight, right? If it comes overnight, then it will be quite a shock to the system. If you wake up and your face is all of a sudden 20 years older, 30 years older, it's quite a shock. Luckily, it happens over time. So that means then you start thinking again, oh, NAMDAK says I'm momentarily changing, and there's a difference since I was 16. So probably I'm not permanent, probably impermanent. So I don't really know. You see, then you have this neutral doubt. Maybe permanent, maybe non-permanent. Right? You see that? Yeah. So that's a neutral doubt. Yeah. So you got rid of this wrong view, what was afflictive doubt, the first one. Oh, NAMDAK said I'm permanent, but maybe I'm impermanent, maybe permanent. I think I'm permanent. You see? So that doubt is still afflictive because it's not in accordance with reality. See that? So then next doubt is neutral. It's going already away from the wrong view of seeing yourself as permanent, right? Then you read another book or you attend another teaching, and then again you say, people tell you, look, the body is momentarily changing. Look what happens, the cells that change over a few years. And you think, oh, maybe it's really true. So then you think, maybe I'm permanent, maybe impermanent. Probably impermanent. See that? Yeah? So that is a doubt tending towards the factual, tending towards the reality. You see that? And that's a very constructive doubt. And so the doubt here, number 5, in the root afflictions, is an afflictive doubt, meaning the doubt is not tending towards the factual. Because the doubt that tends towards the factual, or the doubt that goes towards reality, is a very constructive one. And that's why Arya Deva said, if you have this doubt with regards to emptiness, that shakes samsara. Meaning, if you understand emptiness, you see that ignorance is the wrong form of consciousness. That insight, or that merely doubt, starts to break the concrete aspects of ignorance. Right? So that's very important. Yeah. So then what this doubt is all about. Afflictive doubt. Yeah. Is it clear? Yeah. Yeah. So that's number 5, right? So we had how many? 6. So number 6 is afflictive views. Afflictive views. 6. So number 6 can also be subdivided into 5, just to make it easy for yourself. Yeah, I do it tomorrow. But yeah, it's kind of that number 6 for the time being is for you important to know that this afflictive, view is kind of the main among the subdivision. The main thing is this view of the transitory collection we already talked about. This ignorance that has to be eliminated. Yeah. So we saw previous ignorance is a very coarse one. Yeah, number 4 in the sequence, right? That ignorance is very coarse. It's not very subtle. It's just okay. Law of cause, the fact doesn't exist. Right? Yeah. Samsara doesn't exist. Nirvana doesn't exist. Liberation doesn't exist. If you think like that, that's a negative way of approaching the problem. You see that? That's why it's been classified as an affliction or a cause for suffering. So now number 6, this view of the transitory collection is one of the afflictive views, the most important one. That's the real issue to be addressed, because that's the root cause for the afflictions to arise. As we just before the break, I told you, we discussed that, when we get angry, when some desire comes up, then we have this view of the transitory collection. Body and mind are momentary changes. So we focus on the body and mind and apprehend or hold to a particular I and mind that seems to exist inherently without dependence. You see? That's the ignorance, that's the root cause of samsara, this afflictive view. Yeah, so that's number 6. Yeah, is that a bit clear or not? Yeah, so then the other ones I will explain a little bit tomorrow, or otherwise it becomes maybe too much. Yeah, I mean, I can just finish it off. Maybe. Is that okay? Yeah, because sometimes there's so many divisions, and it gives a lot of clarity, but for some people, if it's quite new materials, oh yeah, another division into 4, and then into 5 and 6, and it's just. But it gives clarity. It's really true. If you divide things well and you define them, you give them a definition, a nature, a function, it's very constructive. But if you, for example, I didn't read much in Western psychology, but if you relate it with Buddhist psychology, to be honest, there's not selling Buddhism, but it's very precisely defined. What state of mind are we talking about? What is its nature? What is its function? How it is being created? What does it produce? It's very clearly defined. And it's only being clearly defined within the context of definitions and divisions. Yeah? That brings a lot of clarity. Yeah, so yeah, just to finalize, so afflictive views, number 6, right? I said one of those, or the most important one, is this view of the transitory collection, right? Yeah, so that's the main thing to hold. Then there's also a view of, you don't have to write down, but you can just to make the picture complete. Yeah, the view of holding to an extreme. Like, for example, think that things either exist permanent and inherent, or nothing exists at all. There's 2 kinds of extremes, right? Some people think, oh, everything is random, nothing depends on cause and effect. Or nothing exists at all, whatever you do doesn't matter anyway. That's also a problem, right? It's kind of an extreme view. And that's, to hold on to that. And then so if you wanna put the numbers, then number 6, as we saw in the sequence, right? 1 was attachment, 2 was anger, pride was number 3. Yeah, I feel like a school teacher. Ignorance was number 4, doubt number 5, and afflictive view was number 6. Yeah, so then 6A is a view of the transitory collection, as we just discussed. Right, that's the most important one to be understood. 6A, the view of transitory collection. 6B is this holding towards extreme, thinking either things exist inherently, permanent, one extreme, and the other extreme is nothing exists at all. Yeah, so in quantum mechanics, we have the same kind of, in physics, basically, we have the same thing. We have this kind of aspect of determinism, that all the things, how finer we go, we can find something that will lead us to understanding everything. And then we have other aspects in quantum mechanics, which talks about randomness, or spooky kind of events, as Einstein likes to speak about. Sometimes particles behave as a wave, and sometimes as a particle. It's for some people spooky if you don't see it in the complete context of the wave function being influenced by what we call a hidden variable, or anyway, it goes too much into mechanics, but there's kind of 2 extremes. Yeah, we either think things exist concrete without dependence, or we think nothing exists at all. That's number 6. B. Yeah, you can. If people do 1, 2, 3, it's easy to do, but if you B, you have to. It's more complicated. 1 I can see, but you have to be more. Anyway, yeah, so that's number B. Right? And then number C is holding bad views as supreme. That's also very destructive, because if you have a wrong view and you think, oh, I'm right, that's a very big obstacle to eliminating. You know? So also in discussions in the afternoon, never think you're the person who has the right understanding, because that is an obstacle. It's you have to be very open in discussion and be open for other views, and then you learn a lot. In debate in the monasteries and nunneries, I told you many times, it's a very good training to crush the I, because sometimes we think we know it, and then somebody else can put you straight into contradicting yourself, which you actually didn't really understand. It's very good for the ego. Yeah. So, but if you hold on to those views as superior, that causes a problem, right? If you think, yeah, this is the only way, then it's kind of a problem. So that's holding bad views as supreme. Number C, right? Yeah. Then number D is holding bad ethics as superior. You know, especially in certain non-kind of Buddhist, then you do kind of particular behaviors that think to lead you to nirvana, to hold your hand up for the rest of your life, to generate strength. That's kind of practices we can see. People believe that is leading to nirvana. Of course, it builds an incredible kind of effort, but if it really leads to nirvana is a question. Yeah. Anyway, this is for us not too important. And then number E is kind of other wrong views of really believing by the power of reasoning, incorrect reasoning, that there's no cause and effect, or there's no kind of, three jewels or past or future lifetimes. We saw in the previous one, number 4 in sequence, that's a kind of without really having a view. It's just, law of cause doesn't exist. But now having a real view about it, generate a kind of, it doesn't exist because everything is random because of this. You see that? Yeah, it's kind of an afflictive view. That's why the first 5 are categorized as non-views. Right? And all the one classified in the group of number 6 are classified as views, because you hold on to a particular idea based on particular reasoning which is valid. You see that? And our mind does that all the time. When we generate anger, also the mind uses reasoning to produce the state of anger, right? I don't like the situation because of this, because of that, because of this, because of that. The reasoning is not valid, but we generate this view. You see? So it's important to know the difference between a view and a non-view. Yeah, so that's 6A, B, C, D, and E. Right? So that, then you have the picture complete. But for us, the main thing to focus upon is 6A. Yeah, that's the main object of interest, because that's among the 6 root afflictions, or the 10, because if you divide 6 into A, B, C, D, and E, then we have also a group of 5, making 10. Right? 5 plus 5 is still 10. So the first 5 are non-views, and the second group of 5 are views. That's just a kind of technical thing good to understand. And then the main focus is the view of the transitory collection, because among all those 10, the root of samsara is the view of transitory collection. To see there's a collection of body and mind, and on top of that, we apprehend or hold on to a concrete I and mind, to seem to exist in a random without that. That has to be understood, and that has to be eliminated. Yeah, so that's a complete picture. And then, then you have discussion in the afternoon, and then I come back after discussion to see if there are any more questions. And tomorrow we go over the wheel of life. How does that sound? Yeah. So it's a kind of the 12 links, and actually how we are propelled within samsara. So today we have the basics of the 4 noble truths and the 6 root afflictions. Important to be understood. Yeah, if there's any questions regarding those points, then we still have a few minutes to, if there's an answer, then we can try. Otherwise, you can discuss, and then we can come back at 3:15 or something like that. Yeah, Laura?
Thank you, Geshe-la. So my question is about the third noble truth. So often it is explained as there's the blue sky behind the clouds, and the clouds are not part of the blue sky. When you were talking about remembering previous lifetimes, or even planting positive seeds or negative seeds, if we keep this metaphor of the sky, does that mean that like everything is recorded? So we actually deep down know all our previous lifetimes. They're all recorded in there, only we can't access them because of the clouds.
Yeah.
Or is that not the case because of the clouds that knowledge isn't stored? Do you know what I?
So it's recorded, and that it's an object of knowledge, as we technically say, but we are obscured, so we cannot, have that knowledge. We cannot access it. There's a few things there. The blue sky, I said, is kind of a mind, right? It's relation with the mind. It's not the same as the truth of cessation, because the truth of cessation is the mere absence. It doesn't imply a mind. A mind that has this mere absence, right, is kind of similar to the blue sky, maybe you can say. But there's more to say about it. Yeah, so you have to make a clear distinction. True cessation means the absence of afflictions, or a particular affliction, or all afflictions. Yeah, that's very clear. So it's a mere absence. It's a permanent phenomenon. It's a mere absence of afflictions, right? And the mind that has that true cessation in that continuum with that mind, that's kind of an impermanent aspect, right? It's like a blue sky aspect. Yeah, so that's clear. To have, it's not exactly the same as the blue sky. True cessation, one thing. But with the clouds obscuring the blue sky, meaning the blue sky is there, but we cannot access that, or we cannot recognize it. That's one aspect of our mind, because the ultimate nature of the mind we cannot realize because it's obscured by what we call obscurations. And what are those obscurations? Afflictions. Yeah. And there's many levels of obscurations. For example, we also have obscurations with regards to calm abiding. We cannot stay on an object according to our wish for hours or days, right? It's not possible. Yeah, that's an obscuration. If you eliminate that obscuration and you can achieve calm abiding and you can stay concentrated without a split-second distraction on your object, it's possible, right? With your mind. If you have that calm abiding, then clairvoyance comes as a result, right? And the knowledge of previous lifetime, that knowledge is present, but we cannot access it at the moment. But if you have clairvoyance, you start remembering, right? So that means we just obscured. Now, same thing. There's a wall between me and free road, right? So the wall obscures me from seeing what's happening on the road, but things are happening there. That knowledge is there, but we cannot see it. So in a similar way, our previous lifetimes happened. We don't remember. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist before, but we obscure to have the possibility to that knowledge. You see that? Yeah. So yeah, in a similar way, the clouds prevents us from seeing the blue sky. So in a similar way, as long as we have these afflictions, we don't really realize this nature of the mind. And then you get more understanding of the nature of the mind, and then afflictions come go, the clouds come and go. They may be less dark, a little bit whitish, but then eventually all the clouds disappear, and then the blue sky is always there. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah. Fabio, yeah.
Geshe-la, thank you for your teachings again. I wanted to ask you a question around the difference between conventional and ultimate reality. So, how do we as a society, as humankind, can attempt to overcome thousands of years of history where our discriminative consciousness tells us that obviously things are there in a conventional sense, but not in an ultimate sense? It's not I mean, you know, we're looking at sort of thousands of years, or we've actually attributed words and connotations to people, things, and as you said, you know, the idea of I, myself, you know, my phone or whatever. You know, what would be your advice to, you know, counteract this, you know, given that we have, as I said, thousands of years of history of and language constructs to attribute to everything that we see on a daily basis?
So, because of those habituations in the mind, only school of Buddhist philosophy talks a lot about it. You know, that by the power of conceptualizations and verbalizations, we build up all kind of constructs, and that also causes us to see things in a way we thought about before, right? So then it creates this kind of conventional reality in a particular way that's maybe not in accordance with the ultimate reality, right? So the starting point is, in Buddhism, we say, start with the self of the person. Does it exist the way it is or not? If you understand that well, then you bring it out to phenomena, right? Yeah, then you see that nothing existed concrete by itself, because you saw that with a person. Right? David Bohm has a very similar approach. It's very interesting when he says, you know, this self-centeredness, or he says self-identity or self-deceptive thought of apprehension of the self is just a show, you know, but a very convincing show that people feel very comfortable with it and believe that it's an apparent reality, but which is not. So based on understanding that aspect, he says, you see we have this fragmentation of society. We split things up in me and them, right? And that causes separation. And that causes, what he says, not to be incoherent with nature. And not being incoherent with nature in that regard causes problems on the environmental level, causes problems in society, and causes problems on the global level. It's a very interesting way of thinking. And that's exactly what the Buddha also talked about. If you understand that the I and how it actually appears is not reality, and then you see that everything around you is in the same way, then you're more coherent with the actual reality as such. And it's a much more constructive way of thinking. So it's very similar. Yeah. Yeah, will help a bit. Yeah, and conventional reality is kind of how things appear to our minds and how things on a conventional level actually exist. Yeah, there's many levels, more coarser ones, more subtler ones. Well, ultimate reality is merely seeing that things don't exist from their own side or don't exist inherently. The absence of inherent existence, that's ultimate reality. And because of that ultimate reality, we can understand conventional reality much better. Yeah, maybe the process. And same of seeing the self of a person is concrete, but it doesn't really exist the way it appears. David Bohm comes the same thing. And then you bring it out to things around you, right? And you also see interconnected. There's nothing things that exist individually without dependence.
So we can say it's a kind of a middle way between existence and non-existence.
Exactly, because what David Bohm also says is kind of determinism and indeterminism, right? Either things are determined in individual particles, like Newtonian kind of philosophy of right, physics of Newton, and then you moved into the extreme of the quantum theory that it's spooky phenomena, things happen randomly, but it's not true. It's not random. So David Bohm was capable of understanding and connecting things with the general relativity in quantum mechanics and see that with this wholeness, you don't fall into those extremes. It's very in the Buddhism we talk about the same thing. By understanding emptiness, you understand dependent origination. By understanding dependent origination, you don't fall into the two extremes of things exist concrete from their own side, or nothing exists at all, or is random. You see? So it's very similar, the middle way. Yeah.
So it's like watching a film in a way, in a sense, isn't it? You're watching a film and you know that the story isn't real. You just
I mean,
it's kind of an interface, isn't it? It's kind of interface.
How things appear and understanding that's not reality. That aspect is true, right? But and it goes a bit further, right? Because it goes to the object of how things actually appear, not just a movie, but the things appear very concrete. Yeah.
Okay.
But the analogy is similar. The analogy is similar, right? Things appear in a way which is not reality.
Yeah. Okay, this is never straightforward. I mean, yes,
not very straightforward.
I understand what you're saying, but it's never straightforward. I mean, you know,
that's why
I think intellectually understanding it is one thing, you know, but actually making it into a practice,
it takes time.
kind of understanding, it's really quite something else.
Decades project.
Yeah. But anyway, yes.
As long as it says for 50 years he's contemplating this, right? Now
you kind of need to go, yeah.
And that's why
they
all based on hardcore mathematics. When other traditional physicists had a meeting and said, can we refute him? No, we cannot refute him. Oh, we just ignore him. So it's kind of because he's such an intelligent person. And it's very difficult to get your mind around it. It will take time, but possible. Yeah. Don't give up, Fabio. Just keep going.
Yeah, no, I won't. I was thinking actually when you started the lecture this morning, I was wondering whether there is in Buddhism sometimes there tends to be a little bit of a kind of pessimism. You know, one can see a little bit of pessimism in the whole notion of, you know, everything is suffering, you know, mental and conditioned phenomena are suffering, life is suffering, birth is suffering, all of this. I just wonder what you might, you know, what you thought about that, sort of in terms of how it can be perceived, you know, by, you know, people like us studying this, whether.
So, it's important. Why do we contemplate this? That's a very important question. Because why do we contemplate this? To see the nature of reality and to get out of this aspect. That's why we contemplate it. Not to make us depressed or whatsoever. That's not the reason. Right? So that's very important. Because if you really contemplate it well, correctly, then it makes you happier. And it makes you not to worry too much. And that's very constructive. So that insight has to be generated. And that's also the purpose of it. Because the purpose is not to make us more depressed than we already are. So it's very important to see this issue. We cannot do anything about it straight away, but on a long term we can, and that's part we can afford. And that's very positive. And that's why people say, oh, those Buddhists always meditate on death and the burdens and suffering. They must be so happy. But if you meet the real practitioners, they're so kind of and because it's a matter of fact of using the method in a particular correct way. That's very important. Yeah.
So we look forward to hearing you talking about Nirvana next.
Yeah, tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Keep talking about it. Yeah. All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, lunchtime. Yeah, people must be hungry. I'm a bit hungry. Yeah. Okay, so enjoy your lunch, I would say. And then you have a discussion. Maybe you can start, what is it? Otherwise you can do discussion from 2:30 till 3:15. Is that okay? No, then people have a little bit of break to eat and drink and things. And then you have a discussion from 2:30 till 3:15. And then NAMDAK comes to keep you busy for another 15 minutes or something. Yeah, it's okay? Okay. Enjoy your lunch and bon appetit and bon appetito. Eat smakelijk, it's in Dutch. And in German they say Mahlzeit. So enjoy, and then see you and enjoy the discussion as well. It's very important to discuss these things, as we just discussed now a few questions. Like Fabio had this kind of ideas and questions, and Laura. It's very important to get things clear and make sure we're on the right kind of understanding as well. So that's discussions can help quite a bit. Yeah. So then after discussion meet again. Yeah. So before we put food in our system, then we dedicate the marriage just short with bodhicitta, the two bodhicittas, to generate the mind of enlightenment and understanding emptiness, the main two purposes in life. Janyo Sanjo Rinpoche Magye Panamandi Guji Yavanyamba Mevaya Gone Kundavasho Goni Tawa Rinpoche Magye Panamandi Guji Yavanyamba Mevaya Gone Kundavasho. All right, enjoy. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.